Daystar University, a Master of Business Administration, MBA from Regent Business School, and a PhD in psychology from Northwest University in South Africa. With his expertise and training in business and psychology, Mr. Rugira uses these two fields as his tools for cultivating positive aspects of a person to engage with the world around us and uncover areas of growth to move towards full authentic potential. Beyond his humanitarian roles with UNHCR and WFP, Janvier has made academic contributions, holding positions at the University of Johannesburg and engaging in postdoctoral research at Northwest University. Intriguingly, he also explores the intersection of human-machine interaction and its impact on work and life dynamics. Mr. Rugira is a recreational long-distance runner who is always exploring new routes. So I now hand over to you, Janvier, to introduce the session, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much, Nena, for the introduction and for setting the scene. Colleagues, as we discuss today, I want to draw attention to the recent report by the WHO that identified loneliness as a major global public health concern. In fact, in that very report, WHO states that 1 in 6 adults globally report feelings of loneliness, which is linked to chronic illnesses, such as higher rates of depression, anxiety, heart disease, and premature mortality. And thinking about that, in humanitarian emergencies, disrupted communication, displacement, and loss fracture family system, compounding stress and emotional isolation. For UN personnel, as you'd imagine, and their families, loneliness becomes a silent emergency within emergencies that we respond to. And so in today's roundtable, we explore how family-centered mental health support can counteract this isolation and sustain resilience across humanitarian operation. With our echoes of silence, we invite you to examine how connection, often taken for granted, becomes a lifeline in the darkness and the darkest hours of our crisis. As we get started, allow me to take a little moment to introduce the panelists who are joining us today for our discussion. We have Isabel Ramper, who is a clinical psychologist and MDR therapist specializing in transcultural psychology and traumatology. She currently works as the family liaison officer at WFP in Rome, where she leads initiatives on family well-being at a global level. With extensive experience spanning across child protection, psychiatry at international level, in schools and humanitarian field in regions such as Europe, Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Isabel is also the founder of FLOC, a psychosocial support program for UN employees and families worldwide. She speaks 4 languages and is passionate about creating inclusive, resilient communities. Our second panelist is my dear colleague, Mohammad Zaman Rajabi, who joined CISMS in April this year as the regional stress counselor for MENA region and is based in New York. He comes to us as we engage with more than 17 years of experience in mental health and well-being, providing a variety of services to clients, be it at individual level, families, and organizations. Having worked in Afghanistan, in the US, Egypt, and Yemen, Zaman has served in multiple organizations such as IMC, Volunteers of America, WFP, UNDSS, and most recently with DMSPC. Prior to joining CSMS, Zaman served as the project manager for the UN Workplace Mental Health and Wellbeing Strategy, where he supported the implementation of the strategy across the UN Secretariat entities. He holds a master's degree in mental health counseling from the University of Cincinnati in the US, and a Bachelor of Science degree in clinical psychology from Azad University in Iran. He speaks Dari, Farsi, English, and some Arabic. Last but not least is Eliana Nichols, who is a former staff member with the United Nations Interim Mission in Kosovo, UNIMIC, and has an inspiring story alongside her husband, Kenneth James Nichols, who served as a senior security officer for the United Nations and WFP as well. While building their family, Jana accompanied her husband on various WFP missions, both in family and non-family duty stations in locations such as Kampala, Uganda, in Istanbul, Nairobi, Kenya, Beirut, Khartoum, Sudan. As a devoted parent of 6 children, she has passionately contributed and as a volunteer for founding Flock in Sudan. Now she lives in Cary, North Carolina. Yana will reflect with us, and she reflects joyfully on how her rich and diverse experience have shaped her ability to adapt and thrive in many environments. I'm sure that her story is a testament to resilience and positive impact we can all have in our communities. And with that introduction, colleagues, allow me to head straight to the first question, thinking about, institutional perspective. And Isabel, if you could go maybe first with your perspective in high-risk emergencies where communication is disrupted or sometimes impossible, what are the most crucial gaps in supporting mental health of staff and their families? How can we best prepare and respond in real time despite these constraints? Isabel.
Thanks, Janvier, and thank you all for inviting me today. I think it is crucial that we are talking about families in emergencies and crisis situations. You're asking me about the gaps, and the gaps are real in the UN system. We come from quite a long history that started with a very cowboy culture approach to the humanitarian assistance, which did not really consider families at all. And the world and the humanitarian landscape and the staff, the employees, things have changed a lot, and we do absolutely need to consider and integrate families and family members' mental health at every step of the way, at each. So I would say we need to start mainstreaming and really integrating families throughout the organizations if we want to be ready for emergency situation. It's not once the emergency hits, but it's from the very onboarding of the staff member, of the employee, where we need. One of the biggest gaps that we have is that we don't collect information, data, contacts of family members. We have emergency contacts, but we don't have the information systematically of the spouses, of the partners, of the rest of the family members, especially when we're talking about not fixed term contracts. When we're talking about consultants, we don't even know most of the time. We don't have anywhere in our HR systems the information about their families. So from the onboarding, I would say, collecting that information, having the contacts of course, with the staff's approval always, and having those available for the wellness teams, the staff counseling teams, the medical teams, the security teams. So it's really across our systems, integrating families in our onboarding so that they know which are the services available to them, who are the professionals who are there for them. And then from there, from the beginning and the onboarding, pre-deployment sessions, when we are deploying employees to DEL3 duty stations, for example, how do we include the family aspect in these pre-deployment sessions with the counselor, for example? How do we guide the staff members in having these conversations with their families to prepare for any of these emergency situations? How do we include families in security briefings, for example, as well? So I really think there's this whole teamwork that has to be done across our different divisions, units, etc. And then we need to have specific mental health services for families. We need to have mental health professionals that are experts in working with families, with children, who know all the different aspects of these crises can have, all the different impacts, and who can create supportive communities for the staff member, wherever they're deployed, for the family, if they're in a different location, to have these local support communities, to have peer support for families in split locations, for example, and be ready. Sometimes families are split, but sometimes families themselves are caught in the emergency. We've seen it this year. We were involved together in the Congo response, for example, but it happens regularly that families are there where the crisis happens. So what do we do then? Do we have all the emergency response material that is ready for families, for children? Do we have staff, mental health personnel ready to deploy to support the families specifically and the specific needs of the families? So this is a bit of an overview from my perspective on the gaps and the systems we can put in place. Thanks, Jean-Pierre.
Yeah, thanks, Isabel. You raise very important points, and of course you have this passion and global overview with Flock as it evolves. But I think you are mentioning very importantly the importance of mainstreaming support to families, integrating them at every level, which is very key and essential. And if I take that very perspective to use a man who has coordinated responses in many emergencies, at times I believe you found yourself right in the field supporting affected staff and their families in high risk settings where communication and movement were severely limited. What practical approach then have you seen work to maintain social contact with families? And if I get another question linked to that, how can counselors and organizations prepare to respond in real time, ensuring there is a sense of continuity to the normal communication, even when the normal system collapses?
Well, thank you very much, Jean-Pierre, and appreciate the invitation to be here. I can attest to several things that that Isabel already mentioned, and one of the things that I have seen a lot in the field, managing and coordinating response to emergencies, is that a lot of times we don't have a list, or if we have the list of the family members and emergency contacts, they are so scattered that it will take some time for us to actually get those contact information and be able to contact the families. And it takes some time, because when an emergency happens, we have to reach out to so many different people. People are busy. So as Isabel very rightly mentioned, preparedness is key. And I will talk a little bit more about my perspective in terms of the practicalities of family support in emergencies. I think when it comes to your question, one of the biggest things is that having a technological knowledge is key. I know it may sound interesting, but I've seen oftentimes counselors in the field that they are not very technologically capable. We have seen in many emergencies that families use so many different ways of contact. And due to so many different sensitivities, a family may prefer one means of communication, one app. The other family may see the other one more suitable, depending on the context of the country. There are so many different countries that, for example, blocks WhatsApp calls. So it is really important for our counselors to be able to, for not only counsel, for everyone in the emergency, to be able to be technically knowledgeable, to be able to use different apps, and also guide the families how to use them, because this is key at the end. A lot of times people can't use their phones, but they can connect to the internet. So you can use the apps in order to be able to speak. The other thing that is very practical and has always been very helpful was having a kind of a network of family liaison, having a dedicated focal point that is an assigned trained staff or a volunteer to maintain regular contact with the families through whatever means that is suitable in that specific context. This communication could only be to confirm that we don't have any news yet, right? But any contact, any communication is still a contact and communication. It is still valuable. Oftentimes we have seen more than one family involved, and without even us being involved, the families pair up. They become buddies, so they set up this buddy system, and they support each other emotionally and share updates. When we call one of them, the other one already knows what is happening. So it helps with the reduction of isolation and anxiety. And I think having a family liaison network, having a stronger dedicated focal points to this specific task could be very helpful in making sure that the families are also connected with each other, to learn from each other, to share, and to emotionally support each other. Isabel mentioned it briefly, but I want to mention as well, another preparedness that has always come handy is having psychosocial first aid guides ready. We can't wait for an emergency to happen to start developing guides and guidelines on topics specific to this specific emergency, because of course all emergencies are the same, but the contexts are different. So we can't really wait for that. Having these type of guides already developed and ready to be disseminated is important. Another issue is contact protocols. How do we contact the families? How the families contact us? What kind of wording they use, and all of that stuff. Having a contact protocol and explain it to the families is important. And not to forget that these messages, these guides and information packets that we develop must be culturally adapted and must be focused on positiveness and reassurance. Having a safe community space or a safe in-person space is also very important. We have seen in several emergencies that people would prefer to be able to sit in a safe place and talk, even if it means that they have to take a journey like an hour and half an hour, a journey to get to that point. Having that, personal, in-person space, safe space helps a lot with creating that bond and rapport and trust, and making sure that we have a kind of a more heart-to-heart conversation, let's say. It also goes the same with the virtual spaces. It's important to know what kind of a virtual space is safe in this specific country, specific context. So safe community spaces, either in person or virtual, is important. When it comes to real-time, your question, Jean-Pierre, real-time preparedness, the strategies, one of them is having a strong scenario-based planning. I have seen recently that the UN is doing a lot of these type of simulations where they, prepare for a specific type of emergency. And I've seen psychosocial response being part of those drills, but I haven't seen family liaison being part of that. And I think that is important. That is as important as general psychosocial response, as important as logistics and security. So having those type of scenario-based planning is going to help out with responding to the emergency and supporting the families whenever it happens. The counseling readiness, the counselor's readiness, the family focal point readiness is another thing. When we talk about a disaster, having a basic kits is important for the counselor. It helps a lot with creating that safety, psychosocial safety, and that trust. Culturally adapted materials is important. And one thing that we should never forget is that when we are a family focal point, we should explore the environment where we are going to provide support to the families. We need to have information on medical, insurance, schooling, all those information. I remember my team and I, whenever we had a conversation with the families and they had an issue regarding to whatever, we always had a name, an address, and a telephone number to give them. That call this place, go to this place, and this is where you can actually get the help that you need. So having those type of information and be ready for anything that the families may need is going to be very, very helpful. The other thing, practical, is it kind of a decentralized support models is very important. One of them is external mental health providers. It's important that we as counselors or family liaison officers, or whatever you call it, we do have a list of external mental health providers that have various type of specialties for children, for adults. It's important to have those because oftentimes we may not be able to see or support the families as much as we want because of the context and also the amount of work that every person has. Having those type of decentralized support model is going to be very, very helpful. And even if that is not the case, having some local actors training and trained in psychological first aid, if we look at a context that has, elderly as, an old person, they have a sense of community, they have an elderly that everyone goes to, it's important to maybe have them also involved to make sure that we can help them with the grief support and so on and so forth. Above all, we have to really keep in mind that the messaging protocols that we use as family liaison officers should be always ethical, ensuring that all our communications prioritize the dignity, giving hope, giving clarity. If we don't know something, we don't know something, but we have to be very clear about what we know and what we communicate. Vague, overly technical updates, this is not what the families need. They need emotional truth. They don't need all these big words. So the focus should be on, hope, their dignity, clarity, emotional support, and things that actually matter to the family. And last but not least, local cultural consideration is important when we, speak to the families in our messaging. We need to make sure that we keep these consideration to just make sure that we resonate with a kind of a diverse, belief system. And also having a functioning feedback loop where we allow families to also express their needs, express their issues, give us feedback, and also receive their acknowledgement, even if a solution is delayed. So that having that feedback loop that goes two ways is going to be very, very helpful in making sure that the families feel heard and feel included. So these are the things that I wanted to speak about in terms of, the practical things that actually helped us in the field, and to just complement what Isabel mentioned in terms of the gaps that are, in the UN system. Thank you very much, Jean-Pierre.
Thanks, Saman. Very, very practical things, particularly looking at your rich experience in the field and the coordination of emergencies, which I guess is your daily reality in many respects. You do mention, very important points. You mentioned about a support system to be in place, the fact that we need to be prepared, because when we talk about emergencies in the UN and the humanitarian sector in general, we are just talking about when it happens, not if it will ever happen. It's bound to happen. And families, and to quote you, they need emotional truth. And I think it's at that very point I want to, most likely from your global responsibility day job type of you and Isabel, to learn from a practical area of somebody who's gone through that. Yana, to get out of that perspective, but more at a personal level. So Yana, if you will, from your past and personal perspective, what are some of the very visible and less visible emotional and practical realities that families of UN personnel experience during crisis and emergencies? This could be more formal or informal. Did you find any effective in maintaining a sense of connection despite the crisis condition, with all the experience that you've had in the field, both as a spouse and at some point as a staff? Yana, if you will.
Janvier, just to let you know, I know Yana's been having challenges with unmuting herself, so there might be a slight delay. Just keeping you,
All right.
yeah, letting you know.
Let's see
Which is very interesting, I think, and shows how not family friendly our internal systems are, because we face these challenges
Absolutely.
all the time with Teams. And if you
Mhm.
don't have a UN email, it's extremely difficult. So when you're trying, we're talking about technology and the
Yeah.
importance of technology in helping us connect with the families. Here we're seeing, we're facing some of the challenges and the gaps.
Very, very practical and linked to what Zaman was talking about when he mentioned about those that are technologically appropriate, context appropriate, which media of communication that is to be used. So in that, with all those challenges and what we see now within our eyes with this event, really demonstrate how difficult the situation can be, given, local regulations, local resources, sometimes even having to introduce a new platform to the family, which is what we tend to say. We say, we will communicate through Teams, which is, to be honest, a foreign concept to some of the families. Zoom is like known. It's not the go-to thing for the UN. WhatsApp is not officially cleared, which also is another challenge. As we wait for Gianna to be connected, is she on now?
I think so.
Yes. Hi.
Oh.
I think I'm on. I had a bit troubles with the camera and being muted. Hi, everyone.
Don't worry. It's actually, it demonstrated the challenges of communication, which is really one of the things that Zamani did raise and Isabel, and you come to really demonstrate, even that it happens and planned. I want to pick on that very one, Yana. From your perspective, what are some of the very visible and less visible emotional and practical realities that families of UN personnel experience during crisis and emergencies? What did you find, formal or informal? What did you find effective in maintaining a sense of communication despite the crisis condition? If you could really open and let us know from your perspective.
Thank you. During crisis, the safety of UN personnel families is threatened and their daily lives are uprooted. Schooling is interrupted, shopping is restricted, and ordinary routines measures are replaced by survival measures. This leads to social isolation. For instance, in Sudan, we spent days confined to our homes with limited access to community life or even outdoor space. Furthermore, during evacuation, families live under the constant threat of separation, with children fearing they might be parted from their parents and uncertain whether they will ever reunite. The visible disruption, it is accompanied by less visible consequences: chronic anxiety, fear, fatigue, hopelessness, and emotional strain arise not only from the situation threats, but also from the feeling of being secondary to the mission. With the sense of being secondary is felt by both families and UN personnel. families often feel overlooked as the focus remains on operational priorities, while personnel may feel that their personal needs and emotional limits are secondary to their duties. They are expected to remain composed and professional, even when their own families are in distress, which can lead to emotional disconnection. Additionally, hidden traumas may linger after difficult experiences, complicating the healing process. Understanding both the visible and underlying emotional challenges is essential for providing effective support to these families. To address these challenges, formal approaches have included meetings on team or a WFP office when possible. We have also organized coffee morning on Teams to discuss various relevant topics such as self-care and fun summer activities for children in Khartoum. On more informal level, families can find comfort in engaging in simple activities together like cooking, arts and crafts, movie nights, and board games. For example, in Sudan, we played board games like Monopoly, Jenga, Scrabble, and chess to remain connected during crisis. This helped promote feelings of control, joy, and happiness. I would like to recognize the hard work of all the staff who worked day and night to make our evacuation successful. I also want to thank Flock for their support while we were in Khartoum and for welcoming us at Jomo Kenyatta Airport. They provided a child-friendly space filled with donations from Flock Kenya, including clothes, books, toys, and bicycles. Additionally, their support for parent rehabilitation and the parent support group led by our amazing Flock and wellness counselor has helped us transition more easily into our lives. I just want to give a shout out to my amazing spouse for always keeping me in the loop and including me as things unfold. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Yana, for sharing your experience, particularly as I think you raised some of the points, particularly about Sudan, what happens, the issues of disruption of what should be called normal, being a spouse of a UN personnel is in itself a challenge because of mobility and other adjustments that comes with it. Now, when we think about emergency, the disruption that you mentioned, particularly the aspect of emotional challenge that can linger longer. But I also like the practical aspect that you are raising, the fact that we are wired to connect, and the more we have in common, be it the games, which is more at an informal level, less structured, but also being, part of the formal system, like what Isabel is doing with Flock and the reception during emergency and evacuation and relocation. And that this very practical experience that you give unto us, I want to turn to all of you panelists. If you could take a minute or two reflecting on past crises and lessons you've learned from a Flock global level, from emergency Zaman, and from you, Yana, as a family member, as a dependent. How can emergencies extend psychosocial support to dependents when staff are deployed in areas where safety is a major concern, with operational limitation that restrict direct contact? And if you will, how can family-focused mental health support be embedded into emergency preparedness plans, ensuring that even in the most chaotic and dangerous environment, staff and their families remain emotionally connected and supported? With no order of priority, anyone to you panelists, if you can let us know your take on those 2 points. Shall we get Zaman? Go ahead,
Yes,
Tiana.
sorry. As a a spouse and family member, I think that we need to be aware that a lot of spouses are not, don't have access to all these tools if they don't get if the spouse makes it possible for them. And sometimes the spouses are not around, they are working, their life is dedicated to the mission, and the family feels that gap. So I would recommend and appeal so spouses can have access to all these tools and not like just always to ask for the permission of spouse. Even if I had to join the flock, my husband had to give me a permission, which I feel us going to the mission, we should have a bit more tools that we can use, not just going through the spouses. More tools, more opportunities, more workshops, so we can be ready how to deal, because we are the one who are taking care of the families while our husband dedicate the life to the mission.
Thanks. Very important. Sounds like there's a gatekeeping type of approach where if the spouse doesn't open that gate, then there's no access to service. And on the other side, I think it's a challenge to us who are here present in this event to think through that. Zaman, Isabel?
Zaman, do you want to go first?
Go ahead, no.
Yes, I mean, Yana is exactly right, saying what I was mentioning at the beginning. I think the biggest challenge is the contact with the spouses. If we can't reach them, then there's no way we can support them. So having their contact information for them to have access to our services, to know which services are available for them to have access to this community, to the communities we create. Zaman was mentioning the importance of peer support, of families being in contact with each other and mutually supporting each other. We see this all the time, everywhere, and this is exactly what we try to create with Flock. It's this supportive community for the spouses and for the staff, because when the staff is isolated, is far from the family, cannot be in touch directly with the family, they also need that community where they are and that social support. So this is essential. I think a big shout out maybe here is also to all the staff who attend these sessions and to raise awareness on the importance of not gatekeeping, but letting their families in and sharing the information, like Yana was saying. We have many agencies now use the well-being platform. In many cases, it's now starting to be accessible to family members as well. I know we use at WFP the well-being app a lot to share all this information. We have lots of emergency preparedness packages specifically for families with, how to prepare your family emergency plan, how to even, your emergency cards to have on the children's backpacks, all the questions, a guide to having a conversation before deploying for an emergency with your families. So all these tools, I think, are crucial for the employee and for the family also to have access.
Correct. Thanks. Zaman.
Well, thank you very much. Isabel just mentioned everything that I wanted to mention, but again, I think my focus is on the systematic approach to the whole family support, because as a UN employee, when I joined, didn't get much really. I think it's important that we include these type of information at the inductions phase. When the staff join in, we ask them to provide these information, as Isabel said, have the information, the names, contact information, and also give them the information at the start. What are the things that are available in the system for the families? It doesn't have to be, costly. It doesn't have to be too much. It's all about the information in regards of about what is available in the system, and preparing the spouses, whether the husband or the wife is a UN employee, prepare them to have this conversation with the families, using them as our agents and advocates regarding the support of the family with their families. So it's like they play the mediator role rather than the gatekeeping role. So I think a whole systematic approach.
I don't know how it works. But if you are like incorporating the
Sorry, could you mute? Sorry, Zaman, please continue.
No,
There's someone talking. Yeah.
As I said, I think the way we can make this happen is a whole systematic approach and bring some changes to the way we view the family as a separate thing to the UN, but rather into view the family as part of the UN. And I think that change of attitude is going to help us systematically change many things. I know Nena and her team, the mental health strategy team, has been working with the UN Secretariat on the onboarding process, and I think this could be one of those components that can be included. That's it from me. Thank you, Jean-Pierre.
Yeah, thank you, Zaman, and the colleagues who are online. We will soon get you to respond to ask questions or make comments. But what I hear from the three of you is a change of perspective. You know, we need to move from gatekeeping mindset to being mediators. But at the same time, if there is no access, how do we support? If people do not even know that there is a support mechanism in place, like the well-being app, like the flock communities of support that exist, then it becomes really difficult to engage. Now, before we get to the audience for questions, if you are to redesign an emergency preparedness plan today, what is one thing that is a family-focused component you'd make non-negotiable? And you're welcome to think in your current job, current portfolio, or you can think as a family, somebody who has been on one side and you see what is lacking on the other one. But what is one thing, family-focused component, you would like to make non-negotiable? And let's do Isabel, Yana, and Zaman.
If I had to choose one thing, then I would say it's having a dedicated team. You need to have specific focal points, specific people who are specialized on the mental health of families and can make sure to integrate the family aspect at each step of the way, through the onboarding, through the emergency preparedness, pre-deployment, etc., through the different teams, mainstreaming it. But if you don't have the human resources, then you can have all the policies you want, but then you have nobody, you don't have an implementation in the end. So I think that's what I would put for sure. It's having a dedicated team to support families throughout the organization and all these situations.
Thanks, Isabel. Yana? Your microphone is on mute. I think as the tech team helps you to unmute, let's move to Zaman. We will come back to you, Yana. Zaman.
I've been unmuted.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I agree with everything that Isabel said. For me, non-negotiable, I would make security briefing. I understand that sometimes there are sensitive issues, but you can make it family friendly. So the spouses and the family can see what's out there for them. That's for me. It's like when we are joining the mission, we should be able to be briefed.
All right. Thank you very much. Zaman, one thing.
Sorry, I feel like I've been disconnected. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, and we are waiting for one thing that will make non-negotiable.
I heard a little bit of what Rana said, and I think that's a very good point. And I've always seen this issue lacking with the security briefing to the families, and that's something that the families have told to me as a person who has played this role for on several occasions. But since you already mentioned that, I'm going to pick a different thing. I'm going to make sure that the family liaison component is included in all the UN simulation. Whenever it's a simulation emergencies, this component has to be there. We, in one of the countries in my regions of responsibility, this simulation happened about a couple of weeks ago, and this component was not there. And I think it's important that if I have to pick one, I will pick this to make sure that as part of the planning, everyone is aware of the family support and everybody is aware of the role that they have to play when it comes to an emergency. So they are prepared before anything happens.
All right, thanks, Zaman. So we need to take time to go through the questions. We potentially take 2 or 3 questions. Max, I will get Wilna and Nena read out the questions that we have. Wilna, do you want to go first with the question, and feel free to direct it to any or the panelists, depending on what it is.
Sure. So this one's for all of the panelists. One of the things that we've heard in previous conversations, so we had a couple of panels last week, was or has been equity of access and ensuring that local staff also have access to support, just as our international staff colleagues. Could you speak to how this is being done and how it can be improved in future situations?
All right, I will take liberty to ask Isabel to go first, then Zaman, then Yana, in that order, if you have any contribution. Go ahead.
Thank you, Janvier, and thank you, Wilnes, for this super important question that is very, very dear to my heart. Absolutely. I think for us, it's always been, since we created FLOC, and from the start of FLOC, the project has always been for it to be as inclusive as possible. And each time we present it, we always say, whatever your contract type, whether you're national, international, consultant, a volunteer, an intern, you and your family are welcome, are part of this community, and have access to all the services that we provide, including the counseling services, even if your family is not recognized dependent and official dependent, etc., etc. So absolutely. And the emergency response I was mentioning earlier about Congo, the huge majority of the response we were involved in as the flows, not only myself, but our regional family liaison officer in Kenya, who also deployed first in Rwanda and then in Uganda, was for the national employees and families across the UN system. So there's no more questions of contracts or even agency, but it's just about, supporting all the families, all the children, and making sure they get safe to a place. In this case, it was Kinshasa in the end, a very long journey, and they get supported and feel that they're not left alone, and feel that hope that Zaman was also, which is a key aspect in also preventing PTSD, feeling that you're not alone, that you don't lose trust in humanity, especially when it's crises that involve, human-made violence, etc., etc. It's really important to feel that connection, that human connection altogether. So, and just another thing that I would like to say that also involves national staff is the fact that we need to consider families all the time. And that will help us be ready when an emergency hits. Like Janvier was saying, they hit, unfortunately. It will happen. So we need to build that resilience. We need to be prepared. And so it's also about those connections in the non-crisis times and making sure they happen. And there are things that we can do. We used to have for internationals that when they were deployed to a non-family duty station, the family could be relocated in a nearby duty station, family duty station, which we don't have anymore. But there are other things that we could, that don't necessarily have a cost, like, you know, all the flexible working arrangements to allow for that strong connection to be there, you know, and not for families to disconnect. And this is true not only for internationals. Most of our national staff are living far, far away from their families and their support system. And so we need to consider this. They don't get R&R. They don't get all the other opportunities that national have to maintain this connection. And so having compressed work schedules and things like this that allow them to go back home and be with their families, that is really important in preventing, you know, whatever disruptions and ruptures during crisis. Over.
Thanks. Yana, do you have any addition to that?
Okay, I agree with Isabel. Also, I would like to say that I saw a difference when I joined my husband in the beginning, when the old support system was through him, and the time when I volunteered for FLOC, and when things start changing for WFP, when we had many things access to us. So I think I see equity because we are addressing the issue, and more than we address, we will do more for the families.
Thank you. Zaman.
Yes, I think when it comes to your question, Volna, it's the matter of capacity, right? I have heard this, you know, many times before from our national colleagues, and this is true because there is a, you know, disproportionate, you know, the numbers of the national staff versus international staff in many duty stations are disproportionate. A large number of our staff members are national staff. So if we use the same capacity, there will be that, you know, lack of equity. So I think if we want to really, you know, address that, we need to ensure that we increase the local capacities through whatever program that is available. It could be FLOC, it could be a similar program. It could be an internal organizational, let's say, family focal point. We have so many different focal points for different functions within organizations. Why not a family one? Have them trained, have them, you know, build their capacity to make sure that they are there to provide this type of support for the families of the national staff. And the other thing that kind of prevents the lack of, you know, equity is that the international staff members and their families are normally very internationalized. So in terms of the medium of language speaking, they normally speak English, let's say. There are more, you know, let's say they are more internationalized, right? But when it comes to the family members of the national staff, this is not the case. And going back to my first, you know, discussion and conversation, having the locally, you know, local information and local materials in the local language is important. And if we don't have that type of capacity, then this, you know, equity is not going to happen. So making sure the capacities of the organization, increase the capacities among the local staff and among the local staff family members to make sure that they can receive also, you know, information and resources that are, you know, adaptable to their culture and also in their own languages.
Right. Thank you very much, Zaman. I think what we are saying is we leave no one behind, irrespective of the contract type, irrespective of the language and the cultural difference, the values, and we need to broaden our definition of family, which is something that Isabel said very well. And as we come to the end, there were other questions that we do not have time to take to, but I believe this is really the beginning of a broader conversation about this topic, about loneliness, keeping family together. So I want to take this opportunity to thank you, our panelists, for your openness, your insight, your overview, and for everyone who joined us today. Our discussion reminded us that behind every UN staff member working in a crisis is a family navigating uncertainty, distance, and emotional strain, and to some degree who may not have even the resources they need. We've heard how communication and connection, inclusion make all the difference, from the experience of Yana and what Isabel and Zaman have seen, not just for well-being, but for the resilience and effectiveness of our work. As we move forward, let's ensure that our families for the UN personnel are also considered in our efforts. Those of us who are here, we are UN personnel, and we need to facilitate and mediate and make sure that spouses and the families have got access. When we support the people who support us as a staff, we strengthen the entire UN community. Once again, thank you for joining the conversation. I believe this is the beginning, and the more is to come. May we continue to build systems where every family voices echoes connection, care, and hope. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janvi, and the rest of the moderators.
Thank you very much.